Hello and welcome. Today, we delve into a moment that forever changed the face of aerial warfare. The first encounter with the German Me-262 jet fighter in 1944, high above the skies near Asselt in the Netherlands. Imagine a sleek, shining aircraft streaking through the violet-hued sky at over 500 miles per hour, faster than any manned aircraft before it. But what if I told you that this revolutionary machine, hailed as a Wunderwaffe, revealed deadly flaws within months of its deployment? Could a machine that seemed invincible be vulnerable at its very core? How did a squadron of propeller-driven fighters manage to shoot down two of these supposedly unbeatable jets in under 2 minutes, despite the aircraft's technological edge? And what does this tell us about the true nature of victory in the skies? From the first confirmed jet being shot down with gunfire to the secret strategies developed by Allied pilots to exploit its weaknesses, this story is filled with paradoxes and surprises. Did the Germans' most advanced weapon truly threaten Allied air superiority, or did its inherent mechanical and operational flaws doom it from the start? How did relentless Allied tactics and resource shortages gradually turn the tide against the once feared Me-262? And in the end, what lessons about technology, human skill, and strategic ingenuity can we extract from this fierce and complex battle? In this video, we will trace the rise and fall of the Me-262, examining its groundbreaking design, the vulnerabilities that limited its impact, and the daring pilots who fought to neutralize what many believed was an unstoppable flying weapon. We will uncover how, despite its formidable speed and firepower, this jet fighter was ultimately outmaneuvered, outpaced, and rendered obsolete by relentless Allied innovation and tactical mastery. The most astonishing part? Even in the face of such revolutionary technology, the human element, courage, ingenuity, and daring, proved to be the decisive factor. The story begins now, as we step into the high-stakes world of late 1944, where the skies above Europe become the stage for a battle between human skill and technological marvels. One that would shape the future of aerial combat forever. On the afternoon of October 5, in the year of 1944, a tense yet momentous event unfolded high above the skies near Asselt, a small locality nestled within the Netherlands. A squadron of 5 pilots from the Royal Canadian Air Force, belonging to the distinguished No. 401 Squadron, was maneuvering at a considerable altitude. Their aircraft, the iconic Spitfire Mark IX, shimmered brilliantly under the warm rays of the afternoon sun, its sleek fuselage reflecting a dazzling display of light that seemed to compete with the brilliance of the surrounding sky. It was during this moment of calm anticipation that Squadron Leader Smith was the first among the Canadians to catch sight of an extraordinary object in the sky. His keen eyes discerned it as a streak of shimmering silver, a swift, narrowing dart that plunged downward toward the area of Nijmegen, moving with an astonishing velocity that defied belief. Unlike any aircraft they had encountered before in combat, this craft bore no propeller spinning lazily in the breeze, nor did it possess the familiar outline of Allied fighters. Instead, it was a sleek, metallic missile in motion, a veritable harbinger of revolutionary change in aerial warfare, hurtling through the air at a speed that seemed almost impossible for a manned aircraft to achieve. The craft in question was an Me-262, a German jet fighter, banking sharply as it soared against a backdrop of a violet-hued sky. Its exhaust trails emitted faint wisps of smoke, a visible testament to the incredible technology powering the aircraft. For nearly 3 years, intelligence reports from the Allies had hinted at the Germans' ambitious work on jet propulsion, but no one could have truly appreciated the magnitude of what they were witnessing until that very moment. Now, at more than 500 miles per hour, an unprecedented speed at the time. The jet tore past the Canadian squadron, rewriting the rules of air combat in a fraction of a second. Squadron leader Smith responded swiftly, activating his radio to relay commands to his fellow pilots, Flight Lieutenant Davenport, Flight Lieutenant Everard, Flying Officer Mai, and Flying Officer Sinclair. He directed them to assume attack positions, understanding instinctively that this encounter marked a turning point in aerial warfare. The pilots, aware that they were witnessing the first confirmed instance of a jet fighter being shot down by gunfire in air-to-air combat history, simultaneously grasped that they had entered an entirely new era of aviation. More critically, this moment revealed a vital weakness in what German propaganda had lauded as an invincible marvel of engineering. The Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwarme, which the Germans had promoted as their Wunderwaffe, wonder weapon, had just demonstrated its first tangible flaw. Within a matter of months, Allied pilots wielding the formidable P-51 Mustangs would adapt their tactics to exploit this vulnerability systematically, developing hunting strategies that would gradually diminish the impact of this technological marvel and threaten its operational viability. The psychological effect of that initial encounter rippled across the ranks of Allied fighter forces throughout Europe, instilling a mix of awe and apprehension. Pilots who had witnessed the Me-262's swift passage understood immediately that the nature of aerial combat was undergoing a profound transformation. The Germans' new jet-powered aircraft had raised fears that the balance achieved earlier in the war might be destabilized once more. Captain Chuck Jagger, a seasoned pilot of the 357th Fighter Group stationed at Royal Air Force Lyon, was among those grappling with the implications of this revelation. As he listened to intelligence briefings, his concern deepened. The German jet's maximum speed in level flight was now estimated to reach around 540 miles per hour, a figure that eclipsed the top speed of the Allied P-51 Mustang, which was approximately 437 miles per hour. In a straightforward chase, the Me-262 was essentially uncatchable, a fact that could no longer be ignored in strategic planning. The mathematical realities of the situation were stark and undeniable. If the Germans deployed these jets in significant numbers, equipped with adequately trained pilots and sufficient fuel, the Allied strategic bombing campaign, and the all-consuming effort to cripple German industry, faced the grave risk of catastrophic losses. The slow-moving B-17 Flying Fortress, lumbering through skies filled with anti-aircraft fire at a mere 180 miles per hour, would have been helpless targets. The new jets could attack from nearly any angle, evade in a matter of seconds, and make escape before the slower escort fighters could respond. For the first time in the course of the war, the Allies confronted the terrifying possibility that they might lose their air superiority over Europe, a trend they had fought so desperately to establish. The revolutionary design of the Me-262, while awe-inspiring, carried inherent vulnerabilities rooted in the very essence of jet propulsion technology as it existed in 1944. The core of this new technology was represented by the Junkers Jumo 004 axial flow turbojet engines. These engines marked a significant leap forward during combat operations. The Jumo 004B engines powering the Messerschmitt Me-262 proved to be highly vulnerable, often requiring a complete overhaul after approximately 10 hours of active service. In many cases, the engines had to be entirely replaced after roughly 25 hours of flight. This rapid rate of wear meant that, after just perhaps 3 or 4 combat missions, these sleek, high-performance fighters were forced to land with new engines installed. Such a demanding maintenance schedule created logistical nightmares for the German ground crews, who could never quite keep pace with the relentless engine replacements needed to keep the aircraft operational. Beyond the mechanical issues, the engine's sluggish throttle response presented immediate tactical challenges in combat situations. Unlike piston-powered aircraft, which could respond almost instantaneously to throttle adjustments, the WWII 004B exhibited a notable lag time between input and engine reaction. When pilots advanced the throttle abruptly, they risked injecting an excess of fuel into the combustion chambers before sufficient airflow could establish itself. This mismatch caused the temperature inside the jet pipes to rise dramatically, often resulting in turbine blade overheating and potential engine failure. As a consequence, pilots had to manage their throttle carefully and delicately, making gentle, incremental adjustments and patiently waiting for the engines to stabilize before attempting to accelerate further. This necessity for precise throttle control made rapid, aggressive maneuvers, so often the hallmark of aerial combat, far more difficult. In situations where split-second reactions could mean the difference between victory and disaster, the sluggish response of the WWII 004 converted the Me-262 from the world's fastest fighter into a vulnerable target during critical moments. The aircraft's takeoff and landing procedures highlighted these weaknesses even more starkly, transforming what should have been tactical strengths into potential liabilities. To achieve the necessary takeoff speed, the Me-262, with a wing loading of approximately 294 kilograms per square meter, higher than most contemporary fighters, needed to accelerate to over 110 miles per hour. During the initial phase of departure, as the pilots released their brakes, the aircraft required nearly 30 seconds to reach flying speed. During this critical window, the jet struggled to generate enough thrust at low airspeeds, making it effectively helpless. Throughout this period, the aircraft moved in a straight line at a predictable, unchangeable pace, unable to perform evasive maneuvers or take defensive actions. Any Allied fighter that managed to intercept the Me-262 during its takeoff phase faced a near-stationary target, unable to accelerate quickly enough to escape or even to defend itself effectively. The takeoff's inherent vulnerability was compounded during landing approaches, where the same low-speed weaknesses came into play. As the pilot descended toward his airfield following a sortie lasting between 60 and 90 minutes, fuel gauges running low, the aircraft again slowed to landing speeds while reconfiguring flaps and landing gear. During these moments, the Me-262 became just as predictable as in takeoff. A straight, steady target flying level, with limited ability to evade incoming fire. The revolutionary jet engines that initially promised to make the Me-262 nearly invincible at high altitudes instead served as vulnerabilities during low-speed phases. Their reliance on specialized J-2 fuel, which was only available at specific airfields, further restricted operational flexibility. Intelligence officers within the 8th Air Force in England, upon studying the problem throughout late summer and early fall of the year 1944, recognized these inherent weaknesses and analyzed their implications carefully. Photo reconnaissance missions during this period pinpointed the locations of Me-262 bases at Amma, Hepe, Rena, Lechfeld, and Munich Re. When analyzing gun camera footage from the brief encounters with these jet aircraft, Allied intelligence officials confirmed the aircraft's notable high-speed advantages as well as its considerable low-speed vulnerabilities. They understood that during high-speed intercepts, the Me-262's superior velocity was a significant advantage, but after expending much of their fuel, particularly during these high-speed pursuits, The pilots had little choice but to return to their predefined bases where the necessary J-2 fuel was available. Since the specialized fuel could only be supplied at these designated facilities, the Me-262 pilots faced a logistical constraint that directly influenced their operational patterns. They could not divert to alternative airfields or make emergency landings elsewhere, which would have been necessary if problems arose or fuel was depleted unexpectedly. This dependence on specific supply points made these aircraft predictable targets for Allied fighters seeking to exploit their inherent low-speed weaknesses, especially during critical phases of flight such as takeoff and landing. The vast expanse of Europe during the latter years of the Second World War had become a complex chessboard of military strategy, technological innovation, and relentless adaptation. Among the most significant developments was the emergence of the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, which dramatically shifted the aerial combat landscape. Its introduction, however, was met with fierce resistance and elaborate countermeasures from Allied forces, who recognized the threat it posed to their air superiority. One of the critical challenges faced by the Allies in countering these jet aircraft was their limited options for effective engagement. Conventionally, propeller-driven fighters, such as the mighty P-51 Mustangs, could not match the speed and altitude capabilities of the Me-262. Their usual tactics, high-speed chases and head-on attacks, proved ineffective since jets could outrun them easily and often operated from heavily defended airfields deep within German territory. These bases enjoyed extensive anti-aircraft defenses, making direct assaults perilous and often futile. This state of affairs created a unique tactical dilemma and, paradoxically, an opening for innovative tactics. Allied pilots and commanders recognized that if they could position their propeller-driven fighters to loiter near known jet bases, particularly during vulnerable moments such as takeoff and landing, they could ambush the jets at their most exposed and defenseless. This approach required a delicate balance of patience, endurance, and daring. Fighters had to remain airborne for extended periods, fueled sufficiently to stay in the area for hours, and be prepared to pounce at the opportune moment. Executing such a strategy was no trivial feat. It demanded pilots willing to venture into some of the most heavily fortified airspace in Germany, zones bristling with anti-aircraft artillery, surface-to-air missile systems, and intercepting fighters. Yet, it remained the only reliable method for propeller-driven aircraft to stand a chance against the more advanced jet foes on anything close to even footing. The Luftwaffe was quick to realize this vulnerability. Once the losses of their jets became evident, they intensified their defensive preparations. To thwart these daring ambushes, German command implemented a series of extensive defensive measures. They constructed dense flak corridors, narrow lanes along approach routes leading to Me-262 bases, lined with heavy gun emplacements featuring 88 mm anti-aircraft guns, 37 mm automatic cannons, and multiple 20 mm rapid-fire systems. These fire curtains created a deadly barrier that any attacking fighter had to break through, significantly increasing the risks of interception and attrition for Allied pilots attempting to strike the bases. Further complicating the Allied efforts were tactical countermeasures designed to confuse and deceive. The Germans deployed decoy aircraft, strategically placed to lure attackers into well-prepared flak traps. Among these decoys were specially modified structures, such as autobarns near jet bases, that had been converted into emergency landing strips hidden within camouflaged forests. These makeshift runways allowed Me-262s to take off and land from concealed locations, beyond the reach of Allied reconnaissance and intelligence. Despite these elaborate defenses and countermeasures, the fundamental problem persisted: the inherent vulnerability of the ME-262 during its critical phases of operation, takeoff and landing. No matter how formidable the air defenses, these moments when the jets were low and slow left them exposed to attack. Aircrews learned this lesson quickly, and it became evident that no amount of anti-aircraft fire or decoy tactics could fully eliminate this Achilles heel. It was during this context that Lieutenant Urban Drew, a young pilot from Detroit, came to be intimately familiar with the ME-262 threat. At just 21 years of age, Drew had already encountered a jet in combat during a reconnaissance flight over Germany, gathering detailed intelligence about its capabilities and vulnerabilities. His previous encounter proved invaluable, providing first-hand insights into the jet's speed, maneuverability, and operational patterns. By early October of 1944, Drew found himself temporarily grounded, facing disciplinary consequences for conducting an unauthorized victory roll after a successful mission. His punishment, however, was short-lived because intelligence reports soon indicated a concentration of ME-262s at a secret airfield near Akma Aerodrome in northwestern Germany. This sudden development rekindled Drew's combat prospects, and his experience with jets made him the obvious choice to lead a daring fighter sweep against the base. Before the mission, Drew meticulously briefed his flight, emphasizing that success depended heavily on surprise, aggressive tactics, and an acceptance of the enormous risks involved. He urged his fellow pilots to remember that they had to penetrate the well-armed defenses to reach the jets safely. The plan was straightforward in concept but perilous in execution. Approach quickly, strike decisively, and then withdraw before the German defenses could respond effectively. His wingman for this operation was Second Lieutenant Robert McCandless, a trusted officer who affirmed that he would remain by Drew's side no matter what unfolded. Their aircraft, the P-51 Mustangs, coded E-2D and affectionately nicknamed Detroit Miss, were as the tension in the air heightened, Drew prepared his aircraft meticulously for what was destined to be a fierce engagement. With a steady hand, he pushed the throttle forward, feeling the surge of power as his P-51 Mustang responded instantly. Without hesitation, he banked into a steep dive, rapidly increasing speed and shedding altitude at an alarming rate. The roar of his engine grew deafening, a thunderous scream that cut through the air as the Mustang descended with relentless purpose. Meanwhile, just as Drew's aircraft plunged downward, the German ME-262 jet fighters began their own takeoff run. They accelerated smoothly along the runway, their sleek frames slicing through the air in preparation for the dogfight ahead. It was at this precise moment that Drew's Mustang hit over 400 miles per hour in his dive, a blistering pace that underscored the deadly seriousness of the situation. Leading the German formation was Oberfeldwebel Heinz Arnold, a seasoned pilot commanding an ME-262 designated for this mission. By the time Drew's Mustang streaked past at this incredible velocity, Arnold's jet had only reached about 80 miles per hour on the ground, still crawling toward the sky. From a distance of roughly 800 yards, Drew opened fire, unleashing a relentless barrage from his .650 caliber machine guns. The tracers, glowing like fiery needles, traced a direct line along the runway and directly into the path of Arnold's jet. The bullets found their mark, striking the right engine of the ME-262 with deadly precision. The impact sent a violent shudder through Arnold's aircraft, causing it to lurch violently as the engine disintegrated into a cascade of shrapnel and flame. Despite the catastrophic damage, Arnold's jet was already moving at a high speed, making an immediate abort impossible. The crippled aircraft staggered into the air on a single engine, its wings trembling, unable to sustain altitude or gain any significant acceleration. Seeing this, Drew closed the distance to about 400 yards and fired again. This time, his shots struck the cockpit area directly, forcing Arnold's jet into a tailspin. The German pilot's aircraft flipped upside down, tumbling uncontrollably before crashing among the trees bordering the runway. The explosion that followed was fierce, consuming the wreckage in a fireball of destruction. Not far behind, the second Me-262, piloted by Lieutenant Gerd Kaubert, watched the fate of Arnold's plane unfold. Witnessing the destruction, Kaubert instinctively attempted to abort his own takeoff, recognizing the danger posed by the approaching Allied fighter. However, his aircraft's sluggish throttle response coupled with a high landing speed presented insurmountable obstacles. Rapid deceleration was impossible, and the aircraft continued rolling forward at a perilous speed, still on the ground but heading toward a confrontation he could not avoid. As Kaubert's Me-262 maintained its high speed, Drew pulled out of his initial attack, immediately repositioning for another pass. The tension was heightened further by warnings from McCandless, who alerted the squadron to incoming anti-aircraft fire. German gunners, well positioned along the runway, began to find their range, and soon the sky around the attacking Mustangs was punctuated by black puffs of flak shells bursting in the air, exploding dangerously close to the aircraft and adding to the chaos of the scene. Despite the threat of anti-aircraft fire, Drew ignored the incoming flak, choosing instead to dive once more into the fray. He unleashed a long, precise burst of fire into Kaubert's Me-262 as the German pilot attempted to steer his aircraft off the runway at the last second. Hits raked the fuselage and both engines, causing sparks to fly and the aircraft to slow visibly. Fuel tanks ignited in a fiery explosion, engulfing the jet in flames. Kaubert, however, managed to eject from the flaming wreckage just in time, parachuting safely away from the destruction. His aircraft was reduced to a charred ruin, a total loss with no chance of repair. In less than 2 minutes, Drew's aggressive tactics and pinpoint fire had resulted in the destruction of 2 of Germany's most advanced jet fighters, a feat that would later be recognized as a significant turning point. His actions demonstrated conclusively that even the most technologically sophisticated aircraft, like the Me-262, could be neutralized effectively through aggressive tactics and impeccable timing. This engagement proved that during critical moments in flight, technological advantage alone held little value. Instead, boldness combined with precise execution could level the playing field and diminish the perceived superiority of enemy aircraft. However, during the chaos of the engagement, Drew's gun camera jammed, preventing any photographic documentation of his victories. His only eyewitness, McCandless, was caught in the same flak barrage during their retreat from Acma and was shot down, captured as a prisoner of war before he could testify in support of Drew's claims. Without conclusive visual evidence or corroborating witness testimony, the headquarters of the 8th Air Force initially refused on the 12th of May in the year 1983. The United States Air Force bestowed one of its highest honors, the Air Force Cross, upon a distinguished pilot named Drew. This momentous award was officially presented by none other than Secretary of the Air Force Vern Orr, during a formal ceremony that marked a significant milestone in Drew's illustrious military career. In a remarkable demonstration of international camaraderie, Drew and his wife were flown from Johannesburg, South Africa, specifically for this occasion. Their journey to the United States for the ceremony was aboard a C-141 Starlifter, a strategic airlifter known for its ability to transport personnel over long distances swiftly and comfortably. Drew's achievement that merited such recognition was historically unparalleled. He remains, to this day, the only Allied pilot officially recorded to have shot down 2 jet-powered enemy aircraft within a single combat mission while flying a propeller-driven fighter aircraft. This feat is particularly extraordinary given the technological disparity between the propeller-driven fighters he operated and the jet aircraft that had begun to dominate the skies during that era. His success not only highlighted his exceptional skill as a fighter pilot but also underscored the tactical ingenuity required to challenge the advancing jet age. Meanwhile, on October 7 of the same year, 1944, another notable aerial combat event took place that has since become a subject of historical curiosity. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemper, a seasoned pilot from the 479th Fighter Group, may have achieved yet another victory against the formidable German jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262. However, this claim remains shrouded in some uncertainty. Zemper, an experienced leader within the 8th Air Force's fighter operations, engaged a target he believed to be a Bf-109, a classic German single-engine fighter, during a mission over German territory. Yet, the gun camera footage from that engagement was ambiguous, capturing an aircraft that could have been either a Messerschmitt 109 or an Me-262. In the years following the war, analyses of this footage suggested that the aircraft shot down was most likely a jet, indicating a possible victory against the revolutionary German fighter. Nevertheless, due to the unclear evidence and the difficulty in conclusively confirming the kill, the victory was never officially recorded, leaving it as an intriguing footnote rather than an established fact. What was even more significant than the individual claims of victory was the broader pattern emerging among American fighter pilots. These daring aviators found that despite the Me-262's revolutionary speed, many considered it the first true jet fighter, there were tactical methods that could effectively neutralize its advantages. Rather than engaging these jets in their preferred environment of high altitude and at maximum speed, American pilots learned to adopt alternative strategies. By forcing the jets into combat during their more vulnerable phases, such as during takeoff, landing, or when they were transitioning between different flight regimes, they could leverage their own aircraft's agility and maneuverability to even the odds. This evolving understanding of tactics proved crucial in countering the technological edge of the German jets. A month later, on November 6 of 1944, another gripping encounter unfolded that underscored these tactical principles in action. Captain Chuck Jagger, leading a bomber escort mission near Acma, Germany, encountered his first Me-262. Jagger was piloting his prized P-51 Mustang, a fighter aircraft affectionately named *Glamorous Glen 3* in honor of his wife, Glennice. The Mustang was cruising at patrol altitude when Jagger's keen eyesight spotted the sleek, fast-moving jets attempting to intercept and attack the bomber formation he was tasked with protecting. The German jets executed their typical attack run, diving through the bomber stream at breathtaking speeds, firing a brief burst of gunfire, then quickly climbing back to altitude, using their superior velocity to evade counterattack and continue their mission. Jagger watched as the Me-262s disappeared into the clouds, seemingly escaping unscathed. Standard doctrine dictated that chasing after these jets was a futile effort due to their speed and the risks involved, but Jagger was not willing to accept defeat outright. He knew that these jets had to land eventually, and their fuel endurance was limited, making them vulnerable once their fuel was exhausted. In a calculated act of daring, Jagger broke away from his bomber formation and descended through the cloud cover, descending to a lower altitude near Acma Airfield. From his vantage point, he observed a lone Me-262 in the final stages of its landing pattern. Its landing gear and flaps were extended, and its speed had been reduced to approximately 150 miles per hour as it lined up on its final approach to the runway. The pilot inside the jet was evidently focused on executing a safe landing, seemingly unaware of the Mustang pilot diving from above and behind to attack him. Jagger pushed his throttle fully forward, trimming his aircraft for maximum dive speed. The Mustang responded swiftly, gaining velocity rapidly as it descended, aided by gravity. Jagger leveraged this acceleration to increase his speed beyond 4 in the chaos of aerial combat. The scene unfolded with swift brutality. A fighter aircraft, having been hit and severely damaged, went into a dangerous spin, inverted as it plunged downward through the thick canopy of trees that fringed the airfield. Several hundred feet short of the runway threshold, the plane disintegrated in a fiery explosion, erupting into a blazing ball of orange flame that lit up the sky. Despite the intensity of the moment, there was no time for celebration or relief for Jagger. Almost immediately, Acma's defensive gunners responded with fierce determination. Their 88mm artillery shells burst in the air around Jagger's Mustang, each explosion a reminder of the deadly resistance he faced. As he streaked across the airfield at incredible speed and just at treetop level, his mind was focused solely on one goal: survival. His only viable option was to maintain a straight and fast course down the runway, relying on the sheer velocity of his aircraft to outrun the flak crews who desperately tried to adjust their aim to bring him down. The sky around him was alive with tracers, arcs of fiery projectiles crisscrossing the field from both sides as the enemy's anti-aircraft batteries attempted to pin him in place. Amid this chaos, some of the shells fired from one side of the runway actually struck the gun positions on the opposite side, a tragic consequence of the disorder that often accompanies such fierce firefights. Jagger kept his aircraft low and fast, passing beyond the far end of the airfield with precision, and then pulled into a hard, steep climb. His destination was a nearby valley, a natural refuge where he could momentarily escape the enemy's sight and fire. Surviving this perilous tactical situation was a remarkable feat. It demonstrated that attacking an enemy airfield at low altitude during daylight hours was one of the most dangerous missions a fighter pilot could undertake. Yet, it also proved a crucial point. Even the formidable Me-262 jet fighters could be hunted and brought down if the tactics were right. Jagger's successful escape underscored the importance of skill, timing, and strategic planning in aerial combat. He later described the encounter with characteristic understatement, a trait of many combat veterans. "First time I saw a jet," he said, "I shot it down. Not very sportsmanlike, but what the hell?" His words hinted at both the chaos of battle and the gritty realism of aerial warfare, where rules often blurred in the heat of combat. Throughout late 1944 and well into 1945, American fighter pilots worked tirelessly to develop effective tactics against the emerging threat of jet aircraft. Their efforts were rooted in hard-won experience, combined with meticulous analysis of gun camera footage that captured every detail of their engagements. The P-51 Mustang, with its legendary reliability and impressive range, became an ideal platform for these countermeasures. A fully equipped Mustang, with both internal fuel tanks and additional wingdrop tanks, could stay airborne for more than 7 hours. An extraordinary endurance that allowed pilots to loiter near known jet bases for extended periods. This ability to remain on station was crucial, giving them the flexibility to strike when the moment was most opportune. When jet aircraft appeared, Mustang pilots capitalized on their altitude advantage by diving rapidly to close the distance, trading height for catching speed. During these dives, a P-51 could briefly reach speeds approaching or exceeding 500 miles per hour, enabling it to intercept Mi-262 jets during their most vulnerable moments, such as during takeoff or landing. Precision timing was essential. Attacking jets during their takeoff rule required early detection and a well-coordinated approach, well before the aircraft reached its flying speed. Conversely, attacking during the landing approach demanded patience to wait for the right moment, when the jet, heavily committed to its descent with gear and flaps deployed, was most exposed. The American pilots learned to study their adversaries closely, developing an intimate knowledge of the operational patterns of the Mi-262. Persistent observation and intelligence analysis revealed that these jets typically operated during specific windows, early mornings and late afternoons, when visibility conditions were optimal, yet sun angles made visual targeting more challenging for defenders. They also observed that Mi-262s often flew in pairs or small formations rather than alone. This movement pattern had strategic implications. Shooting down one jet frequently created opportunities to attack others in the formation. The German pilots, constrained by limited fuel supplies, could not afford to wave off their landings and attempt to go around for another try if they were committed to landing with low fuel. Once an Mi-262 was on approach, with its fuel nearly exhausted, the pilot had little choice but to continue regardless of threats from the attacking fighters, giving Mustang pilots a psychological edge. The jet pilot knew that aborting a landing or going around was not an option when fuel was critically low. This forced vulnerability became a significant advantage for the defending fighters. The Mustang pilots, aware of this limitation, could press their attacks with confidence. The idea that these highly advanced jet fighters could suddenly accelerate and escape the relentless pursuit was, from the outset, an illusion. Despite the Luftwaffe's continuous efforts to improve their defensive strategies and tactics, the fundamental limitations inherent to their aircraft and operational environment remained stubbornly unaltered. As Allied aircraft and fighter escorts grew increasingly numerous and persistent, German air defenses became more complex and layered. The defensive corridors, often referred to as flak alleys, became densely packed with anti-aircraft artillery, with some approach routes now protected by more than 100 different guns of various calibers, each aiming to intercept and destroy the intruders before they reached their targets. Alongside these formidable ground defenses, the Luftwaffe intensified its aerial combat tactics. The fighter cover over their bases and key operational areas was reinforced with the deployment of specialized aircraft such as the Focke-Wulf FW-190D and the Messerschmitt TA-152H. Pilots flying these aircraft were specifically tasked with engaging Allied fighters that dared to approach jet bases, regardless of the tactical situation at hand. Their primary goal was to intercept and neutralize the incoming Allied fighters before they could descend into the critical vicinity of the jet operational zones. Meanwhile, pilots of the Mi-262s were instructed to adopt more unpredictable approach patterns, frequently executing random turns, sudden altitude changes, and erratic maneuvers, in an effort to make interception by Allied fighters more difficult and less predictable. In addition to air tactics, some German airfields employed smoke generators to shield their runways and aircraft during takeoff and landing operations. These smoke screens were designed to obscure the field from enemy observers and attacking aircraft, adding a final layer of defense against the relentless Allied bombing campaigns and fighter sweeps. Despite all these measures, flying tactics, defensive armaments, smoke screens, the inescapable mathematical reality persisted. The performance and operational constraints of the Me-262 jets could not be fundamentally altered. They required specific bases equipped with designated fuel supplies, and their limited fuel endurance meant they could only stay airborne for restricted durations before needing to land and refuel. This limitation meant that Allied fighters could, with sufficient effort, saturate the airspace around those jet bases, effectively turning the area into a zone of constant threat and sacrifice. The inevitable consequence was that some engagements became nearly unavoidable, with Allied fighters converging on these vulnerable points during their operational windows. One of the most illustrative and devastating examples of these tactical realities occurred on February 25, in the year of 1945. On that day, American Mustangs of the 55th Fighter Group executed an expertly timed and brilliantly coordinated attack on Geilstadt Airfield, targeting the parked Me-262s during their takeoff procedures. The attack demonstrated the effectiveness of surprise and precise timing, catching the German jets unprepared and vulnerable just as they began their critical departure phase. The attack was meticulously coordinated so that the P-51s arrived at the airfield precisely when multiple Me-262s were in the process of commencing their takeoff roll. The ensuing chaos gave the American pilots a significant advantage, enabling them to destroy 6 of the enemy jets either on the ground or during their crucial moments of takeoff, with several others sustaining damage. These losses constituted a substantial fraction of the operational jet fleet for that unit, underscoring just how costly such engagements could be for the German side. German military records reveal that the jets targeted in this raid belonged to the ill-fated Kampfgeschwader Kuka Flugzeug Kompanie Ochtanvierzig, commonly known by the abbreviation KFKA-54. This unit, a bomber formation that had been recently re-equipped with jet aircraft, was characterized by a glaring deficiency in fighter pilot training. Its pilots, despite their technical proficiency with the new jets, lacked the extensive combat experience and tactical finesse necessary to defend their bases effectively against well-coordinated fighter attacks. The success of the 55th Fighter Group's raid underscored a crucial lesson: that concentrated and deliberate fighter sweeps against jet bases during periods of known operational activity could produce dramatic results, but only at a significant tactical risk. During this attack, several of the attacking Mustangs sustained damage from defensive fire, illustrating the peril inherent in such daring assaults. The overall tactical success hinged heavily on the element of complete surprise. Once lost, the outcome could have been much different. The psychological impact of these losses on the German jet pilots was profound, and its effects were cumulative over time. The Me-262 pilots were among the most elite aviators of the Luftwaffe, carefully selected for their skill, extensively trained, and often veterans with considerable combat experience. They were fully aware of their aircraft's technological advantages and initially approached their missions with a justified sense of confidence. However, repeated losses during crucial phases such as takeoff and landing gradually eroded that confidence and fostered an atmosphere of dread surrounding these moments. Pilots understood that once committed to a takeoff or landing, they faced a significant risk of ambush, especially with Allied fighters could be lurking. That event marked perhaps the most significant and final aerial clash over German territory during the Second World War. The Luftwaffe commanders had amassed a formidable force of 37 Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighters, which they had carefully assembled from the Jagdgeschwader 7th Fluggeschwader, preparing for a coordinated and bold strike against the formidable bomber formations approaching Germany. This operation represented the largest concentration of jet aircraft ever committed to a single mission during the entire conflict, illustrating the desperate and innovative efforts of the German Air Force to turn the tide of the strategic bombing campaign. Leading this daring attack was Oberleutnant Gau Wegmann, a seasoned pilot who took command of his squadron and advanced in a relatively loose formation toward the incoming enemy bombers. This formation approach allowed for flexibility and tactical movements during the engagement. As they closed in on the bomber formations, Wegmann's unit employed a new weapon system in combat for the first time: the R-4M unguided rocket. These rockets, carried in racks mounted beneath the wings of each aircraft with a total of 12 per plane, were designed to explode in close proximity to their targets without the need for highly precise aiming. Their primary purpose was to inflict damage through blast effects and fragmentation, increasing the chances of destroying or severely damaging large formations of enemy bombers with a salvo launched from a distance. As Wegmann's aircraft released their R-4M rockets, they struck a formation of 60 B-17 flying fortresses, a key component of the American strategic bombing forces. Witness reports from observers on the ground described the rockets ripping through the bomber formation, with multiple bombers being hit and seen to fall from the sky. Meanwhile, other Me-262 pilots continued their attacks using the aircraft's formidable 30mm cannons, taking advantage of their superior speed to execute multiple passes through the formation before enemy escorts could mount an effective response. The engagement, although short-lived, was marked by its intensity and ferocity, exemplifying the deadly potential of jet fighters confronting heavy bombers. German pilots claimed to have shot down 12 bombers and 1 escort fighter during this encounter. However, the records kept by the United States military tell a different story, indicating that approximately 8 heavy bombers were actually lost in this attack, along with the destruction of 3 Me-262 jets in air-to-air combat. This disparity between the claims of the German pilots and the actual recorded losses reflects a common wartime phenomenon: overclaiming. Often driven by the chaos of combat, adrenaline, and the fog of war, which led fighters to overestimate their successes. Even if we accept the German claims at face value, the proportion of aircraft they managed to shoot down was minuscule relative to the entire bomber force. Out of a large formation, which had already flown long miles to reach its target, the jets destroyed fewer than 1% of the attacking bombers. The remainder of the formation reached its objective and successfully released their payloads, delivering devastating bombs on their designated targets. The strategic bombing campaign, designed to weaken Germany's military and industrial capacity, thus proceeded largely unaffected. The casualties among American fighters were significant. 5 pilots failed to return, and many crew members aboard the bombers were either killed outright or captured. Despite the limited tangible damage inflicted by the jet attack, the mission was judged a success from the perspective of the Allied strategic planners. It demonstrated the potential, albeit limited at that stage of the war, of the Me-262 jet fighter as a weapon capable of challenging the Allied air superiority. This operation was part of a broader effort by the Germans to develop and deploy their jet fighters under increasingly difficult conditions, driven by shortages of fuel, materials, and experienced technicians. In the aftermath of this encounter, the German High Command turned its focus toward the elite unit known as Jagdverband 44, which was formed in February of the year 1945. This unit was a direct response to the urgent need to maximize the limited resources available and was commanded by none other than Adolf Galland, a legendary Luftwaffe fighter pilot and former general of fighters. Galland's unit consisted of Germany's most experienced aces, pilots with hundreds of aerial victories to their names, making it the cream of the Luftwaffe's remaining fighter force. This elite squadron was given priority access to aircraft, fuel, and logistical support, representing Germany's final significant effort to deploy jet fighters in meaningful numbers under conditions that could enable them to operate effectively. Galland himself was an active participant in combat missions, flying alongside his pilots and scoring victories with both his cannons and the R-4M rockets. Other members of Jagdverband 44 also claimed successes against the American bomber fleet, and some even reported encounters with escorting fighters, where the tactics and sheer speed of the jets gave them an advantage if conditions favored their approach. Yet, despite these promising reports, the operational lifespan of Jagdverband 44 was tragically brief, measured not in months but in weeks. Due to the relentless Allied bombing campaign that targeted their bases and supply during the course of World War II, the deployment and operational readiness of the German jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262, was always a matter of significant strategic concern. Despite the aircraft's advanced design and potential, the Luftwaffe was never able to maintain more than 50 of these jets in active combat at any one time, and, on most days, the actual number of available aircraft hovered around only 25. This limited availability was due to a combination of logistical, maintenance, and supply challenges, which hampered the full potential of this formidable weapon. At the same time, the Allied forces faced an overwhelming aerial advantage, with their fighter strength exceeding 5,000 aircraft constantly in the skies, complemented by thousands of bombers operating across the theaters of war. These staggering numerical disparities made it clear that, mathematically, the odds were heavily stacked against the German jet fighters, an insurmountable obstacle to turning the tide of aerial combat. The pilots of the Me 262, proud of their craft, claimed to have shot down approximately 542 Allied aircraft in air-to-air combat, a figure that, while impressive, reflected the typical wartime tendency to overestimate successes on all sides. Post-war analysis conducted by American researchers, however, painted a more restrained picture, suggesting that the actual losses inflicted by the Me 262 were significantly lower than wartime claims indicated. The reality was that Allied fighters and escort fighters managed to destroy Me 262s at a rate that outpaced German production and training capabilities, further diminishing the jet's impact on the air war. In terms of verified kills, American military records credit the P-51 Mustang fighter with approximately 92.5 confirmed shootdowns of Me 262 aircraft. It is important to note that this figure includes not only air-to-air kills but also aircraft destroyed on the ground during takeoff or landing operations, which were common due to Allied interdiction efforts. Among American units, the 357th Fighter Group, famed for flying P-51 Mustangs, led the way with 18.5 confirmed jet kills. The 55th Fighter Group followed closely, claiming 17 kills, while the 78th Fighter Group and the 339th Fighter Group each credited with about 15 kills. These numbers attest to the fierce aerial battles fought over Europe and the persistent threat posed by the German jets. British forces, primarily flying Hawker Tempests and Spitfires, also claimed their share of kills, with approximately 12 confirmed Me 262 destructions. Cumulatively, the losses inflicted on the German jets by both Allied air forces exceeded the number of Me 262s available for replacement, and despite ongoing production until the final days of the war, the operational jet force steadily dwindled. Post-war interviews with veteran German fighter pilots who flew the Me 262 reveal a range of opinions regarding its tactical effectiveness. Some pilots, like Georg Peter Ida, who personally claimed 12 kills, including 9 P-51 Mustangs, admitted that the aircraft's remarkable speed at high altitude made it a relatively safe platform for bomber interception. However, he also acknowledged that Allied countermeasures, such as improved tactics and electronic warfare, increasingly neutralized this advantage. Walter Dahl, another accomplished pilot credited with 11 jet victories, including 6 Mustangs, highlighted that practical limitations, such as fuel shortages and engine reliability issues, severely restricted the jet's tactical flexibility. These problems meant that, despite the aircraft's impressive theoretical performance, its operational utility was often compromised in combat situations. Similarly, Heinrich Bahr, who accrued a total of 2,430 victories in his career and claimed 16 Me-262 kills, frankly stated that the jet arrived too late in the war and in insufficient numbers to influence the outcome significantly. Franz Schall, widely regarded as the war's top German ace with 17 confirmed kills, including 6 4-engine bombers and 10 P-51 Mustangs, was killed in action in April of 1945. Earlier in his career, he had emphasized the aircraft's limitations, especially its high approach speeds and wide turning radius, which hampered its ability to engage maneuvering enemy fighters effectively. These tactical lessons learned from Me-262 operations had far-reaching consequences, shaping the development of jet fighters globally after the war. Following the conflict, Allied engineers and scientists examined captured Me-262s intensively, testing them at military research facilities across the United States and Britain. Their studies confirmed that the basic design of the aircraft was fundamentally sound, showcasing innovative features for its time. Still, the critical technological barrier was identified as engine performance, particularly related to reliability, fuel consumption, and throttle response. These insights prompted rapid advancements in jet engine technology, leading to newer aircraft such as the American Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, the Republic F-84 Thunderjet, and the Soviet MiG-15, all of which incorporated solutions to the issues faced by the Me-262. These modern jets boasted longer engine lifespans, more responsive throttle controls, and improved overall reliability, an evolution driven directly by during the latter stages of World War II. The evolution of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter represented a significant technological leap aimed at countering the overwhelming Allied air superiority. The Germans, recognizing the vulnerabilities of their early jet aircraft, such as limited range, fragility, and mechanical unreliability, embarked on a concerted effort to improve these aspects. Through relentless innovation, they enhanced the aerodynamic design of the airframes, making them more resilient against enemy fire, and upgraded engine performance to boost speed, altitude, and operational range. These refinements were crucial in addressing the specific weaknesses that Allied fighters had exploited in early encounters, and they marked a decisive step toward making the Me-262 a more formidable adversary in the skies. Within the American fighter community, pilots who managed to successfully intercept and shoot down the Me-262 quickly earned a reputation as experts in jet combat. Their victorious engagements became a subject of intense study, with combat reports meticulously analyzed by intelligence officers and flight instructors aiming to develop effective counter-strategies. Beyond the notable figures of Urban Drew and Chuck Jagger, numerous other American pilots accumulated jet kills, each victory stemming from the persistent application of tactics honed through challenging first-hand experience. These tactics often involved aggressive maneuvers, rapid identification of the jet's vulnerabilities, and coordinated attacks that required exceptional skill and bravery. The pilots who undertook these dangerous missions typically shared certain traits that set them apart, keen eyesight capable of spotting elusive targets at great distances, exceptional gunnery skills honed through rigorous practice, and an aggressive temperament that drove them to take calculated risks. Many were willing to accept dangers that more cautious aviators deemed too perilous, such as attacking heavily defended jet bases amid dense elements of anti-aircraft fire. The courage displayed in these missions was borderline reckless, yet these pilots understood their vital role in crippling the German jet threat and believed that their sacrifices could significantly influence the broader strategic outcome. The toll of these confrontations was extremely high, impacting both the Allied and German sides profoundly. American pilots who participated in attacks on German jet bases often faced perilous conditions, flying into heavily defended areas far from home soil. Many of these pilots succumbed during these missions, their aircraft engulfed in flames or shattered by flak, with some bodies never recovered from crash sites deep within Germany's territory. The loss of experienced pilots, valuable assets in any aerial combat environment, dealt a severe blow to the Allied fighter force. On the other side, the German Luftwaffe's elite jet pilots, whose skills had been cultivated over years of rigorous training, were increasingly difficult to replace as the war progressed. Their loss, whether through death or capture, represented not only a personal tragedy but also a strategic setback. Each German jet pilot who was killed or taken prisoner embodied hundreds of hours of painstaking training, millions of Reich marks invested in their development, and an accumulation of tactical expertise forged through countless combat encounters. The attrition of these seasoned aviators was especially damaging given Germany's diminishing capacity to produce trained replacements, as the wartime industrial effort was increasingly compromised. The relentless stress faced by these pilots, combined with the relentless combat conditions, often led to errors in judgment, accidents during the challenging phases of takeoff and landing, and a measurable decline in overall combat effectiveness, even among the most experienced Luftwaffe jet pilots. The infrastructure supporting the operations of the Me-262 gradually deteriorated throughout early 1945, reflecting the collapsing German war effort. As Allied armies pushed into Germany and strategic bombing campaigns intensified, the availability of vital resources such as specialized jet fuel became critically constrained. Many refineries had been destroyed or captured, leading to shortages that rendered ongoing operations increasingly difficult. Furthermore, the supply chain for spare parts, necessary to maintain the aircraft's airframes, engines, and weapons systems, disintegrated as factories fell into Allied hands or were bombed into oblivion. The trained maintenance personnel, crucial for the upkeep of these complex machines, were either killed during air raids or reassigned to ground combat units as Germany's desperation grew and the military faced manpower shortages. Aircraft carriers, landing strips, and airfields, key elements of operational readiness, also faced direct assaults as the front lines shifted eastward, further hampering the Germans' ability to sustain their jet operations. By the final months of the war, specifically in April and early May of the year 1945, the remaining Me-262 units operated under increasingly dire circumstances. Many jets were sheltered in makeshift airfields, such as sections of autobahns or hidden within wooded areas, to avoid detection and attack. The pilots often flew from these improvised strips with minimal supplies, working with whatever parts and fuel they could scavenge. The relentless Allied air offensive, coupled with the destruction of German industrial infrastructure, meant that the operational capacity of the Me-262 force was reduced to sporadic sorties flown by scattered units operating largely independently of one another. During these final days, command and control structures disintegrated, leading to a chaotic and fragmented operational environment. Some pilots. The fate of the Me-262 and its operational history is a compelling chapter in the history of aerial warfare, shaped by a confluence of technological innovation, strategic shortcomings, and the relentless tide of war. Throughout the final days of World War II, a small contingent of pilots, some belonging to the elite Jagdverband 44, continued to take to the skies in combat missions. These aviators, despite the crumbling state of Germany's military infrastructure, managed to score kills even as the Nazi war machine disintegrated around them. Their perseverance underscored the aircraft's potential, even amidst the chaos and collapse of German military might. Post-war assessments by American and British aviation experts unanimously acknowledged that the Me-262 represented a groundbreaking leap in aircraft technology, an innovation that, in an ideal scenario, might have transformed the air war. This jet fighter was the first operational aircraft of its kind to combine speed, firepower, and advanced aerodynamics, marking a turning point in aviation history. Yet, despite its technological brilliance, the Me-262 arrived on the battlefield too late to alter the overall outcome of the war. Its potential was hamstrung by a host of systemic issues that could not be addressed simply through technological improvements. Chief among these issues was the chronic shortage of fuel, which severely limited operational readiness and sortie rates. The shortage was symptomatic of the broader resource constraints faced by Germany late in the war, which impeded the mass production and deployment of advanced aircraft like the Me-262. Additionally, the Luftwaffe lacked sufficient numbers of trained pilots capable of fully exploiting the jet's capabilities. The complex operational procedures required for safe and effective use of the aircraft, along with limited experience among German pilots, further diminished its tactical impact. On top of this, Germany's inability to achieve and maintain air superiority meant that the Me-262 often operated under the threat of Allied fighters and anti-aircraft fire, making safe missions difficult. Furthermore, the strategic environment was unfavorable. The Allies had gained overwhelming numerical superiority in the air, with vast fleets of piston-engine fighters and bombers dominating the skies. Under these circumstances, even a technologically advanced aircraft like the Me-262 could not surmount the formidable disadvantage posed by Allied numbers and logistical support. The aircraft's speed and firepower, impressive as they were, alone could not compensate for the broader strategic and operational deficiencies Germany faced at this late stage in the war. Despite these limitations, the Me-262's influence extended well beyond the battlefield, leaving a lasting imprint on the development of aerial combat tactics and military doctrine. The engagements between the Me-262 and American fighters, notably the P-51 Mustang, revealed crucial lessons about the nature of technological superiority. It became clear that possessing advanced hardware did not automatically translate into tactical dominance. The concept that innovation must be paired with strategic and operational finesse emerged as a fundamental principle, shaping military thinking for decades to come. One of the most enduring lessons from these encounters was the importance of identifying and exploiting enemy vulnerabilities rather than relying solely on raw technological advantage. Fighter pilots learned to focus on tactics such as altitude leverage, using high ground to build up speed in dives, timing attacks during vulnerable phases of enemy aircraft's flight paths, and maintaining continuous patrols over known or suspected enemy operating zones. These strategies proved effective in countering the Me-262's superior speed, demonstrating the importance of tactical adaptability and forethought in aerial combat. The understanding that even revolutionary weapons systems have Achilles' heels became a cornerstone of military training, influencing how air forces approached combat scenarios and procurement decisions during the Cold War and beyond. First-hand accounts from pilots who engaged the Me-262 offer a vivid window into the psychological and tactical challenges faced during those critical confrontations. Chuck Jagger, in his autobiography and various interviews, vividly described the perilous nature of fighting these jets. He explained that bringing down a Me-262 often necessitated accepting substantial risks, including exposure to enemy fire and the inherent dangers of high-speed dive attacks. Jagger emphasized the importance of split-second decision-making, often under conditions of imperfect information, where timing and situational awareness could mean the difference between success and disaster. He recounted the tense experience of loitering near German airfields, aware that the moment he committed to an attack, enemy fighters and anti-aircraft defenses would be activated against him. The meticulous planning required to time his dives for maximum speed while avoiding detection was a testament to the skill and courage of these pilots. Despite the dangers, many pilots derived a deep sense of achievement from proving that American fighters could hold their own against what was widely perceived as an almost invincible adversary. These combat stories reveal both the technological challenge posed by the Me-262 and the resilience of the pilots who faced it. Urban Drew, another notable figure among these pilots, received his official recognition only in 1983, almost 4 decades after his combat victories. His words reflected a mix of frustration and pride. For many years, his accomplishments had been denied acknowledgement due to a lack of corroborative evidence. Nonetheless, Drew stressed that the significance of his missions transcended personal awards. He believed that the development and deployment of the Messerschmitt Me-42, more widely known as the Me-262, marked a pivotal milestone in aviation history. This aircraft was the first operational jet fighter to be introduced by any nation, representing a true technological breakthrough that promised to revolutionize aerial combat. Despite this remarkable achievement, the aircraft's actual impact on the course of the Second World War was nuanced and, in many ways, limited. It was a complex mixture of notable successes and strategic shortcomings that together painted a vivid picture of the challenges faced by pioneering engineers and pilots alike. The design of the Me-262 incorporated several innovative features aimed at overcoming the primary weaknesses that had hampered earlier jet aircraft. One of the critical areas of improvement was the engine technology. The new engines were built for longer operational life and had a markedly better throttle response, allowing pilots more precise control during critical phases of flight, such as takeoff and combat maneuvering. These enhancements directly addressed the most glaring deficiencies of the Me-262's predecessor, the Messerschmitt Me-265, which had suffered from short engine life and sluggish throttle response that hampered agility and operational reliability. Additionally, advancements in fuel efficiency were crucial. The original aircraft's range was limited to approximately 650 miles at most, a significant constraint for strategic operations. The improved fuel consumption typical of the later variants meant that the aircraft could stay in the air longer, opening opportunities for more extended operational missions and reconnaissance sweeps. Stronger, more robust landing gear was another vital upgrade, as it reduced the incidence of accidents during landing and takeoff, a notorious problem that had plagued the German jet program and caused numerous operational losses. The cockpit design also saw important enhancements, particularly in visibility. Better pilot views provided critical situational awareness during the most vulnerable and decisive moments of flight, the takeoff roll and the landing approach. These improvements aimed to boost pilot confidence and reduce the risk of accidents during such high-stakes phases, where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. Soviet engineers, meanwhile, studied the Me-262 intensely. They examined captured aircraft and engines, which were shipped back to research facilities where extensive testing was conducted. The insights gained from this analysis significantly influenced subsequent Soviet aircraft designs, most notably the MiG-16 and Yak-15. While these aircraft incorporated many technological principles learned from the German jet, Soviet engineers also notably incorporated British jet engine technology obtained through espionage and strategic technology transfer. This blend of intelligence and innovation accelerated the Soviet Union's leap into jet-powered fighters, helping them catch up with and eventually challenge Western air superiority later in the Cold War. The broader implications of the Me-262's development extended well beyond direct combat outcomes. Its technological breakthroughs and the data obtained from extensive testing worldwide played a significant role in the global shift from piston-powered fighters to jet propulsion. This transition, which became dominant during the late 1940s and throughout the 1950s, was marked by rapid advancements in aircraft design that rendered propeller-driven fighters largely obsolete for frontline service within a decade after the war's end. In practical terms, by the early 1950s, virtually every major air force had replaced propeller-driven fighters with jets. The progress was so swift that older aircraft, once considered state-of-the-art, were relegated to training roles, ground support, or museums. The Me-262, despite its limitations, contributed to this transformation by providing invaluable insights into jet performance, aerodynamics, and aviation technology, thereby hastening the pace of modernization across the globe. Yet, when evaluating the practical and strategic impact of the Me-262 during the war itself, the results were somewhat disappointing. The aircraft did achieve a number of tactical successes, with individual pilots demonstrating remarkable skill by tallying impressive kill totals in certain engagements. Specific missions highlighted the jet's impressive speed and maneuverability when conditions favored its use, such as in head-on attacks or when engaging from a position of advantage. Nevertheless, these victories were largely isolated and did not translate into a tangible strategic advantage. The overall influence of the Me-262 on the broader Allied air campaign remained minimal. The strategic bombing campaigns against Germany continued largely unimpeded, with Allied fighters maintaining control of the skies and ground forces advancing into Germany with unwavering support from effective air cover. The jet's presence did little to alter these fundamental dynamics. From a strategic and resource perspective, the cost of developing and manufacturing the Me-262 was immense. The aircraft demanded scarce materials, specialized manufacturing facilities, and a highly skilled labor force, resources that, in the context of wartime Germany, could arguably have been allocated more effectively. Instead of pursuing a relatively small number of advanced jets, some argue that Germany might have benefited more from producing conventional fighters in larger numbers, which could have been operated more efficiently given the available fuel supplies and the training level of pilots. The story of the Me-262 also underscores the limitations of technological innovation as a sole solution to strategic problems. The image of German pilots proudly flying their jets, the strategies devised to counter the formidable jet threat carved their own significant place in the annals of aviation history, not because they relied solely on technological superiority, but because they exemplified tactical brilliance, unwavering courage, and an unyielding refusal to surrender any advantage to a seemingly unstoppable adversary. These tactics demonstrated that human skill, when honed through rigorous training, guided by sound doctrine, led by resolute leadership, and sustained by steadfast determination, could overcome the intrinsic limitations of less advanced technology. This shift in the balance of power occurred at a remarkable pace. The change from a period of German confidence in their jet prowess to a position of Allied dominance over the skies unfolded in fewer than 8 months. The timeline was strikingly rapid. From October of the year 1944, when the first Me-262 jet was shot down, to May of the following year, when the last jet-powered operations in combat ceased altogether. Such a swift transition was not the result of a single decisive factor but rather a cumulative effect, an intricate interplay of various elements, each contributing to the gradual erosion of the German advantage. Systematic exploitation of the vulnerabilities inherent in the Me-262 became a cornerstone of Allied tactical success. Allied forces relentlessly targeted and neutralized these jets, often focusing on their most vulnerable moments during takeoff and landing, effectively reducing the number of enemy aircraft able to participate in critical bomber interception missions. Each destroyed jet was one fewer capable of defending Germany's vital aerial assets, thereby weakening the Luftwaffe's ability to control the skies. Furthermore, each pilot lost, either killed in combat or captured, represented more than just a single enemy soldier fallen. They embodied irreplaceable experience, specialized training, and tactical knowledge that took time and effort to develop. The continual attrition of these skilled pilots diminished the Wehrmacht's ability to sustain effective jet operations. Every successful Allied attack on a jet base forced the Germans into a more fragmented and less coordinated defensive posture. As Allied pressure intensified, the Germans found themselves forced to disperse their remaining jets across more locations, complicating their ability to mount cohesive and effective countermeasures. The final months of Me-262 operations were marked by a sense of increasing desperation among German pilots, who fought with a growing sense of futility as their tactical situation deteriorated day by day. Resource shortages further hampered the German efforts. Fuel supplies dwindled, restricting sorties to only the most urgent and crucial missions, while engine problems and maintenance issues kept many aircraft grounded for extended durations. Allied fighter patrols made every takeoff or landing a potential trap, with the threat of destruction ever present, heightening the peril faced by the remaining jet pilots. Disruptions caused by the need to relocate bases, often hastily and under the threat of Allied bombing, compromised both operational efficiency and the morale of German airmen. Despite these overwhelming obstacles, some pilots persisted in flying combat missions until the very last hours of the war. Their resilience and professionalism, often risking their lives in what was essentially a losing battle, reflected a deep sense of duty, a sense of honor, and perhaps even a flickering hope that their sacrifices might somehow influence the outcome of the conflict. The war's conclusion did not come with a dramatic final clash but rather through a slow, inexorable unraveling of Germany's military infrastructure. As early as the beginning of May 1945, the once formidable German aircraft and jet forces lay in utter disarray. Many Me-262 jets were abandoned on airfields, left in the woods to avoid capture, or deliberately destroyed by their own crews to prevent their falling into Allied hands. A few aircraft managed to be flown into Allied territory and subsequently surrendered, but most simply ceased flying altogether as their fuel supplies ran out and the maintenance infrastructure collapsed beyond repair. The jets that had once held the promise of dominating the skies and sweeping away Allied bombers now stood scattered across the remnants of Germany, silent relics of a technology that had fallen short of its operational potential. These abandoned aircraft served as poignant symbols of the gap between the theoretical superiority of the jet technology and the harsh realities of warfare, logistics, and attrition that ultimately dictated their fate. Meanwhile, the pilots operating the iconic P-51 Mustangs, which had relentlessly hunted and neutralized these jets, returned home at the war's end. Their mission was deemed accomplished. Their efforts had succeeded in robbing the Germans of their most advanced aircraft. The threat once posed by the jet fighters was effectively neutralized through masterful tactical ingenuity that proved far more decisive than mere technological superiority. This entire saga, from the initial deployment of the Me-262 to its gradual elimination, underscored a vital lesson of aerial warfare. In the complex dance between technology and human skill, it is often the strategic application of the latter that determines victory or defeat.